summon
Manju
to draw
Dark Master Zorc
from my deck. Roll my dice. Roll my dice. Roll my dice.
Hello everyone, it is me, Pui, and I am here today to talk about this blue monster right here, Dark Master Zorc. Why am I talking about this card? Well, because what you are looking at currently is the greatest new Chaos Turbo tech of all time. Allow me to explain. This right here is a Zorc Chaos Turbo list. This is not my list. This is the first list I saw on YouTube by none other than, you know what? I don't remember or care what his name is. But anyway, I ripped this list, made some adjustments to what you saw here, played around on the ladder, and then ended up going 8-1 in the Damage Step Internal, crowning myself Damage Step Internal Champion without even really being on the team anymore. After that Internal, I put it down, was too busy playing Pandabus 2 in the GFC and topping that. Make sure to leave a comment if you want to see a video on that too, but I was off and busy with other things until eventually I was sent this list by MMF, captain of the Damage Step Yu-Gi-Oh team, as the list you should play if you're playing Chaos Turbo. The list does look quite unconventional, particularly the 2 copies of Back to Square One in the corner down here. This card is basically the Phoenix Wing Wind Blast of Tribute to the Doomed. So you play it, you discard a card, and then you talk a monster your opponent controls back on the deck, face up or face down. Deck kind of has a really great tempo sort of plan, really just makes your opponent never draw live anymore. I thought it was a little silly, a little bit high-rolly, until this deck got 3rd place at PWC Q32 in the hands of Damage Step member Frico Suave. And I was like, okay, we have a real deck on our hands. Damage Step really pushing it here. Really, this deck was formed in the crucible of Team Damage Step. And that deck that I am referring to is this right here. Now, this is the updated Zorc Turbo with Damage Step technology, 1 copy of Back to Square One. The deck is absurdly consistent, absurdly aggressive, absurdly destructive, can kill people out of nowhere, can play a slow game, can play a fast game, and it is wildly powerful, much more than I could have possibly expected. So there's certainly a lot of to talk about here, but make sure that you subscribe if you like what you see so you can see some more videos, maybe some more replays in the future. Make sure to watch till the end because I'll be providing some ideas on where the deck could go and some sideboarding guide after the matches. But for now, let's start to talk about what is in front of us. We are now playing 3 copies of Dark Master Zorc, still with 1 copy of Contract with the Dark Master, and we are now playing an additional Senju of the 1,000 Hands to get said Dark Master, that 3rd copy. So what you'll notice that really sticks out in this list more than any other is that while this list is constructed much like a Chaos Turbo deck, we have our Black Luster, our 2 Chaos Sorcerer, we've got our Thunder Dragon, we've got a Kaiku and a 2nd, we got some powerful 1-ofs, a Serpent, a Sangan, a Sook, and the same sort of lineup plus the Zorc and the Back to Square One. What you will not see anywhere in this entire 55 is a flip monster. We're just not playing any. And the reason why is because this deck completely blanks Nobleman of Crossout entirely, which was absurdly powerful. The simple idea that this deck was built around from the beginning, and what I was excited about most, is that this card right here, Manju, and to an extent Senju, normal summon, +1 attack. Crazy amount of things to do in 1 turn and go. It sounds so simple, but the speed and consistency with which normal summon, add a monster, and attack really starts to put the pressure on and keep the ball rolling in this format is absurd. Sure, you can say that a flip like Gravekeeper Spire, Dakoichi, or Faith, those are better pluses when they work, but in most cases, you don't keep the body, and you need to take a turn. It's set in defense, it's vulnerable to knock, it doesn't get to attack. In this case, we normal summon, and we +1. And then we summon Sook, and we flip it down, and we flip summon, and we +1. Sook here certainly isn't doing as much as it is in other decks, but it is certainly doing a lot nonetheless. This card helps us a bunch in the Warrior matchup, it helps us a bunch in the Control matchup, and it has utility in every matchup as long as we have a live Manju, and it serves as another Dark. So we're really trying to ramp up, get our normal summons, get our attacks in as we're building up these Zorcs and the rituals. Now, what are we doing once we get our hands on enough Zorcs and rituals? Well, because we play the ritual, we have the option to summon Zorc. summoning Zorc is an incredibly strong option, especially in this meta where people are playing Solemn again. It is very easy to catch someone Solemning early, and if you normal summon a Manju and then summon a Zorc, get rid of their flip and attack with both, that is 4,100 damage right there. So you can potentially just kill your opponent out of nowhere. Zorc is an incredibly powerful threat. It is also inherent removal in the same way that Zorc and BLS and Breaker and even Virus are inherent removal. So we actually have 6 pieces of inherent removal versus your average Chaos Turbo deck's 5, which is absurdly powerful. It also can destroy face downs, unlike Zorc, which is big. It is a big attacking body. It's good to go with Ring. It's good on its own. It is a dark on top of Manju being a light, so you have a light that is searching a dark, which means that we also have very easy access to Chaos via that. That's the first option. The second option is that we are playing 3 Phoenix Wing Wind Blast and a back to square one. Playing 2 back to square one did prove to be a little much, especially when we are still having the contract at the Dark Master, but the amount of aggression we put on versus the turbo deck that originally won that PWCQ really bodes nicely to tucking our opponent's cards back on the deck, spinning them back, and making them draw them again, especially if we can add all 3 Zorc and contract at the same time, which is way easier done than said. It happens quite often. You can actually destroy with Zorc, attack with Zorc, and then do some combination of Phoenix Wing Blast on the set spell card, so they can't, activate it during the battle phase or a trap. You can do it on their next set, so it's cleared. Whatever you need to do, the combination of Phoenix Wing Wind Blast on a set and Dark Master Zorc is massive. It's good discard fodder. It clears the way for the Zorc to attack. And the same goes for the back to square one. On top of the Zorc, on top of the Nox, this deck is so good at removing opponent's set monsters. And that is why we're actually playing a second Kaiku. So to really put the nail in the coffin here, we clear the way, and then we have 2 Kaikus, and if either of them really ever hits the opponent once, it's gonna really make it difficult for them to ever get a Chaos Monster. And even if they do get a Chaos Monster, this deck, again, is better at removing them on average. On top of that, the deck is better at removing Spy than on average. Your average turbo deck doesn't exactly have access to Zorc. Whereas this deck, you can roll a 1 or a 2, or even a 3, 4, or 5, and then attack over the other one, and then all of a sudden the Spy is cleared, and you still have your Chaos available. So what's really going on here is we actually have an aggressive deck, almost I'd say it's straight up an aggro deck, that's hiding in the form of Chaos Turbo deck. So it's a deck that inherently your opponent wants to keep in Nobleman against, but they kind of really shouldn't. And if they do, they're going to have Dead Nox in their hand, as you'll see in the replays. Thing is, now that I'm making this deck tech, now that I am broadcasting this to everyone, you could just put flips in the deck in the side or in the main, and all of a sudden keep your opponent guessing. They don't really know what to do. You can still set your Tsukiyomi, your Sangan, your Sinister. You can even set these guys if you want to, and they do work on flip summons, so that is a threat for your opponent as well, and you can really mind game them. So for this particular build, I wanted to take advantage of that and play like an aggressive deck. In reality, this deck feels like the spiritual successor to all those Thunder Dragon Warrior decks that sometimes go around. But it's really just consistent, aggressive, and explosive in addition to aggressive. It has a tempo game it can play, it has a bit of a control game it can play, but where it really shines is that we have a combinations of like Zorc and Sorc, Zorc and BLS, Zorc Kaiku, Chaos, Chaos and Kaiku. All this stuff really puts on damage so quickly. And if your opponent is top decking and you have these Wing Blasts and you're back to square one, it's even harder for them to recover. So the deck is really solid. I've enjoyed it a lot. I've been playing it for quite a while and really been smashing turbo. I did play this in the 3v3. I had a really 2 solid rounds, and then anyway, let's talk about the side. We have 2 Ashura Priests and a Book of Moon to help against control. We've got a Berserk Gorilla as well as a Zambira. The Zambira comes in specifically against Warrior, I'd say, especially if they're playing Spy, but the Gorilla is good against Warrior and other decks like Reasoning Gate, like certain variations of control, like Earth Aggro, so I like to have that variation, keep the opponent guessing, but we do want that 2100 as well. I have 1 Mind Control, 2 Trap Dust Shoot to go for Chaos Turbo. I think this felt like more than enough to stop the deck in its tracks, given how much anti-turbo stuff we're already playing. I have 2 Mystic Walk as well as 2 Dust Tornado. These help against burn, and the Dust Tornado and these 3 Sakus also help against Warrior and Earth aggro. So that's the deck. I like it a lot. Again, be sure to subscribe and enjoy these replays. See ya! Thanks for making it to the end, folks. As promised, let's talk about siding. So for starters, Chaos Turbo, we're going to want Mind Control and Trap Dust Shoot, and then we're going to remove some combination of the following cards. It definitely depends on the opponent's build, whether or not you're going first or second. For example, Duo, you might want to keep going first, but going second, Dust Shoot is much more reliable to actually get rid of something meaningful. Sometimes Jar of Greed's a little too slow if you're on the draw, if your opponent's on Dust Tornado, and if you don't know this already, these three cards, despite all being very powerful one-ofs, aren't always too great against Turbo. So use your best judgment, figure out if you're playing or drawing what your opponent's Chaos Turbo deck looks like, and go from there. For Warrior, it's pretty simple what you bring in. You bring in the Beat Sticks, you bring in the Spell and Trap removal, and you bring in the Warrior. Because if you watched my last video, which I highly recommend you do, we kill the Warrior in this household. You can also bring in Book of Moon, and you're going to bring out one Senju and one Dark Master Zorc because they are bricks. You're going to bring out Knock for obvious reasons. Back to square one because it doesn't really get rid of the problem. Duo if you're on the play. Upstart and Jar maybe if you're on the draw. Just want some combination of these out because they are a little bit slow. And generally I also take out a Dust Tornado. So it might look like that, or it might look like that. Next up is Control. Here's one that's a little stranger. We're going to bring in 2 Ashura Priest and 1 Book of Moon, along with potentially Berserk Gorilla and potentially Dust Tornado if it isn't a Decree Chaos Control. But for now, we'll just put in these cards, and what we're actually going to take out is 1 Senju, 1 Dark Master Zorc, and likely 1 Jar of Greed if they're on Decree. Now, why would I be taking out these advantage generators in the control matchup? The answer is that in testing, it became clear that we'd be very slowly grinding out and adding all these Zorcs to our hand, and all of a sudden, I'd be over the hand limit, but still not really able to kill them. So we're still able to gain that advantage and accumulate it just fine. But having an extra Zorc that I can't even really summon in this build is not as useful as having that Ashura Priest to make sure I can still get through the goats. So this is how I assured that I was still able to assemble those kill turns the way I was before as I incrementally chip away with the Manju. And I also have 1 Book of Moon just to increase the chance that we can answer a Tear or a Zorc, protect our monster, or whatever else we need. So that's the control matchup in a nutshell. Next up, we have Burn. We're going to bring in Berserk Gorilla, we're going to bring in Mystic Walk, and Dust Tornado for a start. We're going to take out Tsukiyomi because it's a bit slow, Senju because it's a bit of a liability, but we're not going to remove all of our Zorcs because we do want to be able to get those discards over and over again. And then generally we can take out some combination of these because they're slow. Generally maybe the Upstarts, and Kaiku's actually a bit of a sitting duck as well. So I think something like this would look quite nicely. We're really trying to take advantage of the fact that Contract with the Dark Master can get rid of the Ojamas. If you normal summon Senju and then you use Contract, you can actually tribute Senju and 2 Ojamas to get the Dark Master Zorc on the field. Then you can actually use the effect to clear whatever monsters they have, which is generally very, very strong against Panda and won't give them much of a chance to recover. Another reason we want to keep in all 3 of our Zorcs is because we still want our Chaos monsters live, and we did just take out 2 Dark monsters, so that's worth consideration. I think a plan like this would look quite nicely for Panda. You can also add in some amount of Sakuretsu armor if you'd like, maybe over 1 Quib, and you can add Trap Dust Shoot on the play if you'd like, or even Book of Moon depending on what they're doing. So next up is Reasoning Gate. You see, I used to have 2 copies of Magic Jammer specifically for the Reasoning Gate matchup, but they proved to be not all that necessary versus the new plan of beat them down with things that inherently stop them from doing their combos. So we have our 2 Kaiku, we have Virus as well, we have Zorc to crack back all in the main already, but we are going to add in some Ashura Priest, Berserk Gorilla, probably Book of Moon, and then some combination of Dust Shoot as well as maybe Saku and Dust Tornado. We're going to be removing the Noblemans. Generally the Suk is too slow, the Senju is too slow, we don't need another Zorc, and usually the Jars of Greed are too slow as well. So we're just removing stuff that doesn't protect us from getting OTK'd on the first turn. Stuff like Ashura will make sure the tokens don't come down. Berserker Gorilla is a good aggressive body. Book of Moon stops even a Jinzo in its tracks, as well as the Back to Square One, which is a great touch on top of the Zorc. And then we're going to use Trap Dust Shoot just to make sure they can't chaos us. And that generally lets us build that advantage and put ourselves in a spot where we can crack back with our aggression and they can't really stop us. let's talk about some other options and directions we can take the deck, sorted here by my opinion most to least janky. So for starters, as I said before, I was not playing flips for this particular tournament I entered, but you can absolutely be running some amount of flips if you change the configuration. You can probably remove Senju for that, and that'll allow you to still have that normal advantage generation on top of these searchers, on top of these bodies. Originally, we were playing Magician of Faith into Koichi, but there is something to be said about Gravekeeper Spy getting another 4 level stars on the field to go with your Zorc, so that's definitely worth consideration, as well as Solemn Judgment definitely would be more of a control route. I'd probably go down to only the 2 Zorc and 1 Ritual, and just sort of hunker down, be a little more defensive, really be stacking up those hands, and try to get those big kills incrementally, rather than more explosively or tempo-based. In the other direction, you can actually go a little more aggressive. Once you properly Ritual Summon Zorc, they're both summonable by Call of the Haunted and Premature Burial, as well as your Kaiku and even your Chaos Monsters, so this might be worth consideration. You can also add additional Senju of the Thousand Hands to search Zorc more reliably than it already does, and if you do that, you can actually use Lighten of the Load. This is something that I learned from WoWWink. He actually got second in a little tournament that was held by James Ark, playing a deck that wasn't even using the Ritual. He was just using Lighten the Load to turn all of these Senjus and Manjus into our normal 7 draw 1, which honestly was kind of insane and a really cool concept that I think could be explored further. Nice job, WoWWink. Finally, you can actually go more ritually, so on top of the Senju, you can actually just play an additional contract and try to summon multiple Zorcs a turn. This is especially viable if you play Magician of Faith as well, so you can actually get the ritual back another time. You can also change the ritual. 2 big options I see being good are Reshef, the Dark Being, and Shinato, King of the Higher Plane, as both of these monsters still punish defense mode monsters, though neither of them do it as well as Zorc, and both of them are light despite Reshef having Dark in his goddamn name. So I wouldn't recommend those if you want to still go hard on the Chaos Monsters, which are obviously still going to be stronger than any Ritual monster, because they are not a, 3-for-1 or whatever. So, I hope that some of these got your wheels turning. I hope you like this deck as much as I did. If you do, feel free to like the video, share the video, give the deck a go. I'll put a link in the description for sure. And I hope you are ready to see some more Pui action, because I am not done. I have a very yellow deck coming. So stay tuned, and have a lovely day.